Thank you very much, Dwiraj. From memory, I'm sure that we met in Darwin at least. One of those photographs that I saw you in was up in Darwin. I'm sure that I met you there. And in fact, it was in Darwin that I was speaking to the head of Study NT, I think, Rachel. And she told me that the NT really loves Nepalese students. The Northern Territory, as you know, really values Nepalese students, and said they're very hardworking, they're great citizens, and would love to have as many Nepalese students in the Northern Territory as possible. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Mahesh Dahal, Nepal's ambassador to Australia, and it's a great pleasure to also acknowledge Her Excellency Ms. Felicity Volk, Australia's recently arrived ambassador to Nepal, and of course Susanna. And I must also introduce, she's out of shot, but Priya Raja, who is very shy, but both Ravi and Rahul will know the long history of work and support that Priya has provided over the years. I really need to acknowledge that, and also acknowledge AAERI Nepal members and guests. And I really want to also say a big warm fond hello to Ravi, of course, who and Rahul. But I just want to say Ravi's a journeyman, I think, and he's been through this pandemic. He's been really positive. Ravi could have turned into a bitter, twisted man, but he is not. He's not, and he has kept this ship afloat. And I really admire you, Ravi. I mean that sincerely. But look, I'll just move on a little bit. I've got a few words to say. I really don't want to go into the numbers because, in some senses, you're ahead of the game. Education agents are the canary in the coal mine, as it were. We talk about the numbers of students up, and our data is up until enrolments and completions and what have you are up until the end of December at the moment. That's the lag in our data. But really, you know who are expressing interest in coming to Australia. You've had, as Ravi's talking about, Jonathan Chu giving his analytics about where students are going and so on and so forth. So I might steer away from that. I normally do give some data, but I might steer away from it. Only a couple of things that I did want to mention is really to acknowledge there's about 7% of Nepalese students are currently outside Australia. Now that's a very low number relative to other South Asian countries. And in India, for example, there's 18% of Indian students are currently in India outside Australia. But I think that 7% of Nepalese students outside means that the other 93% are extremely tenacious. They're tenacious. They've stuck the distance, and that's something to be very, very admired. I wanted to say, in terms of not saying too much about numbers and what have you, is because this is really an opportunity for us to hear from the sector. You know, Ravi and Rahul know that I really value their views when they drop me an email or give me a call and give us insights that we don't normally get. And I think this is an opportunity. Government doesn't always have to speak to people that can also listen, and we're doing that. I think to that extent, if we don't talk about the flights and what have you just for one moment, I just want to say that in those terms and listening, there will be consultations that will begin in the fairly near future, I expect in the next couple of weeks, around a revised strategy for international education. So the current strategy that exists goes up until 2025. It's really signed off by the Council of International Education, which is, I think, comprised of about 6 of our ministers. Susanna's my minister, Australia's Minister Dan Tehan, former Education Minister, our current Minister, Minister Alan Tudge, as well. The Council of International Education will launch those consultations about the recovery and moving into the shape of the sector up into, I think, 2035 is, I think, probably the year that we'll be aiming for. So it'll be not only post-recovery, but how the sector may well change and give shape to the sector as it changes. And it'll be about learning from all of this. And I think this is where, in part, online, and I had a discussion with Felicity earlier, Her Excellency earlier today, and it's already been raised, some of those issues around online, the fatigue that students are experiencing, this duality that exists in South Asia. Students happy to study online if they're staying in country, studying with an institution in their own country. They don't have to make their way to university or whatever. But international students want to be in Australia, for example, or they want to be in the UK. And this extended time is fatiguing. It has we understand it. It has psychological stresses. The connectivity is not good in many parts of South Asia. Where that's understood. And I think that is why that we will see coming out of this consultation, and that agents will be an important part of this, and students, is the different modes of delivery and the different sorts of courses that might be delivered. So in talking about diversification of the market, we'll be talking not only about different countries, but different modes of delivery and different courses as well. So this is probably a time to be creative, given the shock to the system that we've had, and also to reflect on what's happened with things such as online delivery, because from what I'm reading, it's kind of got us, or it's getting us through. I'm not saying it's got us through. I don't want to say that it's got us through, because as you're telling us, students are going to some other nations now, but it's been getting us through. But is that the tool going forward? So we need to think about that. And also, interestingly, how with online, how do institutions support those students online? There's talk. Some institutions are talking about study hubs. They're not setting up branch campuses per se, but setting up offices or areas where students can aggregate and get the sort of support they need in these study hubs if they're studying online. And they might be something that's a cooperative between a range of Australian institutions. And we're also looking at transnational education. And I think that earlier, Dwiraj might have talked about Australian institutions getting campuses in Nepal. Now, I'm not about to say that's going to happen. I only because I haven't had those sorts of discussions. But what I am saying is that they are part of the discussion. And you've seen, clearly in Sri Lanka, we have Australian institutions. I'm sure in Sri Lanka, we've got the National Education Policy in India talks about setting up foreign campuses in India. And I know that Bangladesh is interested, and of course, Nepal is as well. But the other thing that you mentioned, and the other work that we undertake, is that policy advice as well. So this is probably out of the realm of agents a little bit, but we're all in this together in terms of educating students. And it's about the policy advice to government and helping to set up the sorts of frameworks and the robust quality frameworks within country and systems that are similar to one another, so that we can talk to one another, if you like. And I'm probably thinking more in this space, in the vocational education and training and the skills space. It seems to be that skilling up people and making people work ready for employment, and that's possibly where shorter courses, some kind of vet delivery offshore is pretty important. Look, that's a bit of a general rave. I know that we have to touch the vexed question of student arrivals, and as Liz said, we don't have any updates for you on that. The situation is as it is. You will read in the press very regularly ministers talking about possible models and what have you, and that I can say that there's a lot of planning going on behind the scenes, but there are many moving parts to this, and I'm sorry that I don't have any particular updates in that regard. I should probably address those questions, which is I'm sure you're all eagerly waiting for, but they're perhaps not quite as inspiring. I did cover off a little bit of this just before. One of the questions was of the recent National Cabinet communique. I think we're talking about probably the 5th of March communique. PM Morrison indicated there's no update on bringing back international students. What strategy have you sought to offset the perceived decline in new international enrolments? That was the question. And I think I've probably covered that in talking about the Council of International Education and the strategy that's being developed. And we understand that all of the benefits that international education brings. We all understand that, and this strategy will be a vision for the next 10 years, and hopefully set the sector up to be more shock-proof to this to these kinds of developments. I think I had the other question, Dwiraj, was the question of are providers allowed to make online classes compulsory? Is that legal? And online is not compulsory, but allowing flexibility to online delivery doesn't remove students' protections or remove providers' obligations to their students under the ESOS Act. Now I've got a whole raft of text that follows, which I'm happy to pass on, that AAERI can pass on to its members around that. But in brief, that's the answer to that particular question. Look, the only other updates I probably want to give is more about where to next, and it's probably to my great shame that I'm not in. I don't think there was any of those photographs of that you showed earlier of AAERI Nepal chapter in many of its meetings. And that is to say that I need to have a greater presence in this. I have been back in Australia for 10 months, but nonetheless, I am regularly in contact with AAERI India, and I need to make many more connections with AAERI Nepal, and of course with Her Excellency just starting. We will commence a new working relationship as well, and so I hope to grow with Her Excellency into this relationship with AAERI Nepal. My door is always open, figuratively speaking, at the moment, and always very, very happy to engage. And I'd like to thank you again for the privilege of speaking to you this afternoon. Thank you.